It's the Alien Conspiracy Podcast. I am your host, Agent Anderson. Come along as we examine UFO sightings, conspiracies, and all things strange. You can follow the show on Twitter at AlienConPod. We also have an email address, alienconpod@protonmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to check us out on Discord and Facebook, links in the description. This week's episode, Secret Space UFOs, Rise of the TR3B, with Darcy Weir and James Goodall. Alright, so this week we're talking about the TR3B, specifically a documentary made about the TR3B called Secret Space UFOs, Rise of the TR3B. One of the things I really like about this particular case is, unlike a lot of UFO cases, we actually have really good video and photographic evidence to go along with the witness statements. That's somewhat unusual. It's not that common.
That's right.
Yeah, but I guess before we get started, I should introduce both of you who are with me today. We're talking to Darcy Weir, who's the director of the film, and James Goodall, who was in the film. And the film we're talking about is Secret Space UFOs, Rise of the TR3B. Darcy has directed a couple of other films, such as Being Taken, Beyond the Spectrum, and The Underground. And James Goodall, or Mr. Goodall, or Jim, what do you prefer?
Jim, hey you, whatever.
Okay, so
yeah, Jim's fine.
We'll say Jim has written 24 books, and he was in the Air Force from 1962 to 1997. So that's, a pretty decent career, making him somewhat of an expert in aviation, I would imagine. His most recent book is titled 75 Years of the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. And I hear you have a new book that's about to be published, something about submarines?
Yeah, I'm covering actually the nuclear navy, Rickover's dream. I'm covering 220 plus nuclear-powered submarines of the United States Navy. I thought it would be fairly easy, and I'm up to 400 pages and 1,300 photos.
Wow.
So I'm covering I'm having at least 3 photos of every single submarine. Plus, I have stuff inside. I have stuff, being decommissioned, and I have, it's going to be a fun book. It's my 29th book.
Okay.
Book 28 is in a holding pattern. I'm waiting for the Navy to give me access to one of the arsenal boats, the SSGNs, the Ohio boats. Yeah, we're talking about 18,000 tons of whoop ass.
Yeah.
So I'm just waiting for them to give me the okay. I've already shot a D5 and a C4 Ohio boat. Those are the ballistic missile versions, and the SSGN is the arsenal boat.
Okay. Well, it sounds interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into the TR3B. So this is supposed to be part of a secret space program. What is the purpose of this program, and do we know for a fact that it exists? The space program I'm talking about here.
So when people discuss secret space, it kind of has a whole spectrum of speakers and commentators to the theory that basically secret space theory is that on a surface level, we have the militaries of the world, we have space agencies of the world collaborating and doing secret missions in space. Okay, that's the sort of surface level hypothesis. If you watch my documentaries, I'm trying to hypothesize additionally that we've seen UFOs out there. Some of them are probably ours, and some of them could very well be not ours, meaning from some other source in the universe, I'd say. This documentary, Secret Space UFOs, Rise of the TR3B, is actually kind of a second documentary. The first one I made was called Secret Space UFOs Part 1, and that covered the whole Apollo space program secrecy and covered very credible UFO incidents that happened where the Apollo astronauts either commented on them or said that they were sent up there to take photos and film them. And then we, are able to actually examine some of that footage or data in that documentary. And I had Stanton Friedman and, Carrie Martinuk helped me with that doc. But this doc, I had Jim Goodall. He comes from the aviation history background. He knows what it's like to work in black projects or secret aerospace projects, let's say. And, he was a navigation and telemetry technician installing systems like that into the A-12 Blackbird. That's the CIA version of the SR-71, which, flew from 1968 onwards, and people only found out about it 20 years later in 1988. So he can give some background on top secret spy planes and stuff like that. And then in this documentary, we kind of went from aviation history and seeing a whole bunch of these triangular crafts being made, even going back to the YB-49, that was one of the first jet-fueled triangular craft that was launched in 1948 by Northrop Grumman, and it kind of never stopped from there. The military contractors and the Air Force have been working hand in hand and testing out very interesting technologies, some of which, the world will never see the light of. And some of us, I think, have encountered what we would describe as a TR3B throughout history. And it's possible some of that was tested out at Area 51, but I guarantee you it's an absolute truth that the A-12, the Blackbird, was tested out of Area 51. And, if you listen to stories from Bob Lazar or some other folks that have been whistleblowers in this doc, we cover Edgar Fouché and his testimony about working at Area 51. There's some photos from him on the base, apparently working on the F-117 when it was in development and stuff. Edgar Fouché kind of blew up the TR3B story in the early 90s, and we cover that. And then Jeremy Reese, he was very close to Edgar Fouché before he died, found out all kinds of information about his past, about Area 51, about the TR3B, and Jeremy Reese, who goes by the name of Alien Scientist on YouTube, he tends to think that Edgar Fouché was telling the truth about a lot of this stuff. I find it very interesting. I think that if you go by the lore of when the TR3B possibly had been tested, or something like the TR3B, I mean, it's a nickname. That's all we can really go by. But we know that Northrop Grumman did develop a craft that ran on on jet fuel called the TR3A. And that was supposedly tested out in the Iraq War. And TR would possibly stand for tactical reconnaissance. The 3B, we think it might be, the rumor is that this anti-gravitic craft was an attempt. It was a reverse engineered sample of something we have, a UFO that we have possibly recovered in the past, whether that's crash craft or we were given it. And, Jim could even speak to that a bit.
Yeah, one question actually occurred to me when I was watching the film was I've spoken with people before, just, at parties or whatever, and the idea out there is that we would never recover a crashed extraterrestrial vehicle because their technology would be so good that they wouldn't possibly crash on Earth. And I always thought that was a strange idea because even our technology, as good as it is, fails all the time. So it seems kind of silly to think that, the technology of a different race or species would be perfected to the point where they would have a zero failure rate. I don't know. What do you think about that, Jim? Do you think that the possibility that something could crash?
And the old saying goes, how does a turtle move? It sticks its neck out first. If you're not breaking things or crashing things or bending things, you're not pushing the envelope. And that goes back to the Wright brothers. And literally, if you have a program and you have not crashed or bent or broken one of your airplanes or whatever the platform is, then you're not doing your job. You're not expanding the envelope. And stuff comes and goes in the secret world that you and I will never know about. I'm a historian. That's what I am, and I'm a hardware guy. I sort of feel like Bob Lazar in a way. He said, when I first met him, this is before he went to work on the desert, you couldn't put a gun to his head to convince him that UFOs were real. He said, I'm a nuclear physicist. If I can't touch it or prove it mathematically, then as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't exist. Well, short time after, Bob got his job out there, and we all know what happened after that. So again, things crash. That's why they have crash trucks at airports. That's why you have the crash trucks at military air bases. Stuff happens. You prang something, you break it. It's going to happen. I don't care what it is. I mean, they had 21 B-2 bombers. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar platform that can actually bomb anywhere in the world, and those things are taken care of like you wouldn't believe. I mean, they have people totally responsible for the airplane. And what happens? Someone washed the B-2, or it was outside in the rain. Water got into its static ports. They apparently didn't turn the heaters on, or maybe they did, and the heater, they popped a circuit breaker. I don't know, but on takeoff, the airplane decided it was gonna pitch up and cartwheel down the runway. Now this is a 3 or 4 billion, billions with a B, airplane, and less than 2 dozen of them, and now we're short one. So that happens. I don't care what it is.
Yeah,
so,
and I'll add to that, in terms of UFOs crashing, possible off-world craft. You just look at the Battle of LA, which happened in, I think that was 1942. So that would have predated the 1947 supposed Roswell crash that is so well documented and hundreds of witnesses have come forward to talk about. Well, the Battle of LA, they unloaded 1,800 shells into the sky over LA to try and take out a saucer-shaped craft that was hovering over the city. There's pictures of it that were published in the newspaper that show, spotlights on something that doesn't look like your typical aircraft. And apparently, we're trying to shoot these things down. So if I don't care how sophisticated your equipment is, if the human element is involved and we want to take it down, well, that's how you're going to get a crash retrieval.
Yeah, good point. And there's lots of stories that actually, speaking of the Battle of LA, we're scheduled to do that one next week. So it's funny you mentioned that one. It's a really interesting case. But there are some pretty credible stories of crashed UFOs, but we probably won't get into that today. It's just that's too much of a tangent, I think. For this movie, I wanted to ask, for people who are unaware, how would you describe the Skunk Works program? That's pretty central to the movie.
Darcy, answer me.
Oh,
go for it, Jim.
Yeah, either one.
I mean, the Skunk Works. Kelly Johnson wrote 15 laws for doing business in the classified or black programs environment, and a couple of those items are: you give authority to the lowest common denominator. Your office door is always open. Someone has a question, an engineer has a question on the production line, he could walk right into Kelly's office or after he retired, Ben Rich, and say, hey, I got a problem with it. And then Ben or Kelly would roll up their shirt sleeves and walk out on the production floor and take a look at it, firsthand. And they say, okay, you know how to fix it? I said, yeah, I think I can do it. And said, then do it. Companies that have real extreme tight orders of authority from the top on down can't operate like that. The Skunk Works gives authority to the lowest common denominator person on the floor. And if he screws up a couple times, you go in there and you find out where that person went wrong, and you show him the right way to do it, or say, well, let's work this out together, and then you let him or her, when we're in that environment, be able to take a hard look at what the solution is and help them work through it. And that's how the Skunk Works works. When they built and designed the original P80, the XP80, they did it in less than a year and a half. Less than 18 months. When they developed the U2, I think it was like 108 days from signing a contract to first flight. When they were developing the Blackbird, the A-12 ox cart, which led to the SR-71, from signing a contract to first flight was 32 months. Today, the Air Force can't change the paint scheme on a C-130 in 32 months. You laugh about it, but it's true. It's gotten so overburdened. When they were building the F-117, let's step back. When they're building the Blackbird, they had about 250 security people at all locations. And that was a build of 50 airplanes, plus the drones, the D-21s. Building the F-117, they built pretty close to 60 airplanes, almost the same number. And they had 500 security people. Ben Rich told me that security in a classified program adds 25% to the bottom line of the costs. So, and a lot of times security isn't for national security, it's to cover one's rear end for doing something wrong or spending money or not doing what the bean counters wanted you to do with that $1 billion they gave you here last month. It's something that happens.
One question I had that occurred to me when I was watching is when they started making flying wing or triangle shaped aircraft, what would be the advantage of using an aircraft like that over a conventional aircraft with the wings and the tail and all that?
If you look at a picture of any of the Northrop flying wings from the XB-30, the YB-49 and the B-2, when you look on them straight on, they're just a thin line. They physically have a smaller radar cross-section without being stealth, just because of the design.
There's also like an advantage to control surfaces, right? Like when it comes to radar and stuff like that, Jim?
Yeah, well, if you don't have vertical tails, or you've canted them a certain way, and you have special coatings on the leading edge, you have special coatings in the inlet, and it's usually an S-type duct that prevents the way you become invisible. You're still going to get painted by the radar, but what you want to do, you want to reflect 99.9% of the energy away from the receiver, and what little energy is still left in the signal, you want to have radar absorption material or structure that literally absorbs the heat from the radiated energy. And that's basically how you become invisible. If the signal can't get back to transmitted from. Now, one of the things that I think the Russians have played with, I know it happened in Serbia during Operation Allied Force, where they lost an F-117. If you transmit a very powerful long wavelength signal, just blast it out there, anywhere you want, and then you have dozens of receivers. So you're coming in, if the thing hits here, it's not coming back, but it's being bounced over here. You have a receiver over here. If you have the right electrical engineers working with you, you can take all those multiple locations. You can do a cross reference, and you can tell pretty close to where it's at.
Yeah, so you're no longer invisible through vector triangulation type thing.
Correct.
So, yeah, and additionally, I know where you're going with that question, Adam. I would say, in terms of the form and function, apparently, of a TR3B or just a flying triangle, an exact triangle. When you look at craft now, like I was speaking the other day, there's the X-47, and there's the Rush. That's an unmanned, pretty much a flying triangle. There's an unmanned Russian stealth plane as well that was launched last year. And if you look at these shapes, and then you look at the TR3B, supposedly, and what eyewitnesses have seen, not all of them are TR3Bs, because supposedly the TR3B was a massive craft. To try and allude to what some people may have witnessed as a TR3B, I'd say the Phoenix Lights. Because if you listen to Edgar Fouché's description of the TR3B, this thing could tank into space. It could take loads of personnel, like an apartment's worth, that type of thing. And you could go from here to wherever you wanted in space with a bit of anti-gravity. And supposedly the thrusters on each corner were using hydrogen. So that was like the only sort of fuel-based propulsion part of that system. But triangular was important to its form and function, mostly because of the way that they were adapting our technology to something they saw on something way more exotic. So let's take Bob Lazar's sports model, for example. If you look at the bottom of that, what does the propulsion system look like? Supposedly there was a center anti-gravitic hub that created the propulsion off the ground, and then there was 3 pylons, and those 3 pylons surrounded that center anti-gravitic engine in a triangular form. And the rumor goes that, if this thing had its maiden flight on 1979 for the TR3B, or whatever it actually was called, they took a look at something like the sports model and said, okay, let's put the propulsion engine in the middle. Let's make it anti-gravitic. That was this rotating, supercooled, mercury-based superconductor. Superconductors creating anti-gravitic effects have been pretty well documented by a Russian scientist named Poklanov. I think Ning Li, a Chinese physicist who talked about anti-gravity and proving that it works. NASA has done a rotating superconductor study, and that paper's been published. So it's like pretty well documented stuff. They were looking at something that was supposedly manufactured on an atomic level, which we are nowhere near being able to do, possibly even now. And they're saying, okay, how do we make this? Well, how do we make a craft that carries out the same sort of ability? So they took a triangular form and they put the thrusters on each corner, kind of duplicating that setup of these pylons on the bottom of something like the sports model. And then they have this anti-gravity engine in the middle that gets you off the ground, and the thrusters allow you to go where you want to go. And people even say constantly, like, if a craft is supposed to be stealth, why would there be 3 lights on each corner on the bottom? And you got to think about it this way, right? Those aren't lights you might be recording. Those are thrusters. Those are that's a propulsion system you're recording. It's not And oftentimes, the videos that are being recorded by eyewitnesses, you can't see the lights with your naked eye. So that just throws that argument right out the window. For example, Alara, who I featured in the doc, she says that she was at this conference and she looked back, she could see something, but then when she took out her phone, she was recording the sky where she used to be in this field, and she couldn't see with her naked eye anything above that field except for one light. And supposedly when they were in that field, they could see some kind of like projection of maybe this strange butterfly type, is the best way she could describe it, right? It was strange. So that might have been the light that was presenting this show to this group of UFO folks doing a CE5 in the field. But what the camera picked up on her phone, which your eye couldn't see, was a triangular shaped craft with a light source on each corner. So it was being stealth in a way. It was projecting some sort of image to hide its form. And then at the same time, your eye can't even see it. The human eye can't see in that light spectrum maybe, and that's why this thing was able to stay cloaked.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier the Phoenix Lights, and I don't think you mentioned it in the movie, but it immediately jumped to mind because some of the witness descriptions from that event seemed very similar, with a craft that was translucent or invisible that they could sort of see like the stars shimmering through and that sort of thing. It seems an awful lot like a lot of the TR3B videos that you can see in your documentary.
Yeah, and the TR3B, again, is supposed to be a massive craft. It's not supposed to be super small. But what I think has happened since, if you believe that something like this might have been test driven in 1979, we've just taken that initial design and we've shrunk it down and we've found more applications for it. And we've probably got drones. If we have the capability to have people sitting in a room using a computer and flying around airspace, there's no reason that won't be the way that we're doing a secret space program, right? And Richard Dolan was featured in the documentary, and he kind of lends to that idea that secret space simply means domination of space and keeping everything that you're doing in space secret and everything that's happening in space secret. It doesn't necessarily mean like Captain Falco and his alliance of square beings or something are doing stuff out there, and there's humans' souls being trapped in bodies, and then I don't know. You know what I mean? We don't really have to go down there, but just very logically, there is a secret space program that's being carried out around the world. The extremely hyper out there sort of story that steals the secret space narrative is, alien beings living on the moon and aliens trying to save the Earth from itself that are like some kind of Captain Falco blue bird people or something, right? And I don't know if there's any evidence of that, right? It's just a story that sounds really exciting, and people get excited about really out there stories. I am pretty confident that there are alien beings coming to our planet and over the years have possibly tried interfacing with us. But, the most common stories from, hundreds of individuals, experiencers, people that have worked in the military, some form or fashion, is that they either look like us or they look like the Greys. We haven't heard throughout history in this sort of subject of bird people. That's a new one. So when you hear something that's like brand new like that, you got to step back and be like, is there corroborating evidence of this, or is this just the new thing? And yeah, so that's what you got to watch out for when it comes to studying all this stuff.
I have a comment along those same lines. First of all, when our government is supposed to be for the people and by the people, when they release something that has been classified and they finally release it to the public, it's probably 20 years old. You're not seeing anything that's state of the art today. Ben Rich, and I was blessed to be his friend. Ben Rich replaced Kelly Johnson at the Skunk Works. And for some reason, Ben Rich had an affinity towards John Andrews from Testers. He's passed away back in the 90s. And myself. And Ben and I talked once a quarter for 25 years. If I didn't call him, he called me. And one of the things that he said right after retired, mid-90s, he was at UCLA. It was a aeronautical engineers graduate seminar. These are all grad students. Ben Rich went up there. He's given his spiel on the Skunk Works, working in state-of-the-art stuff. And he said, and it's you can written down what he said. He said, today, this is 1996, 97 timeframe, said, today we have the ability to take ET home. Now think about that statement. This is the man who ran the Skunk Works, the most advanced, super secret aeronautical research organization on this planet. And he says, we have the ability to take ET home, but our government will not allow that information to be made public. And that's really frustrating. And just before he passed away, I talked to Ben he was at USC Medical Center in LA. He was dying from esophageal cancer, probably as a result of being around the solvents used in making stealth airplanes. And we were talking about my friend John Andrews from Testers and a bunch of this stuff. And he finally said, Jim, we have things out in the desert. And he wasn't referring to Area 51, could have been S4, but he didn't say. We have things out in the desert that's 50 years beyond what I could understand. Not what you think you can build, but what you can imagine. And he said, if you've seen movies like Star Trek or Star Wars, we've been there, done that, or decided it wasn't worth the effort. So that really, this is a man, if anybody on this planet had access and knowledge of alien technology that we're not being allowed to use, it would be the president or vice president general manager of the Lockheed Skunk Works. Now, I did ask the vice president general manager of the Lockheed Skunk Works this past June 3rd, Jeff Babion. I was there doing a book signing on my 75 years of the Skunk Works, and I asked him, we're heading over to the U-2 operation. I looked him right in the eye, and I said, it's Jeff. I said, what's the Skunk Works involvement in alien technology? He says, I said, and he says, tell you the truth. I says, Jim, I have no knowledge. And I'm looking him right in the eye, and you can tell an awful lot by looking into a person's soul through his eyes. And I believe he was telling me the truth. It doesn't mean it wasn't built or designed and operated and whatever, at the Skunk Works prior to him getting there. But we're dealing with an organization that is building and dealing with the most advanced aerospace structures known to man. Maybe not known to aliens, but known to man. And he, like you said, he says, I don't think we're alone, but that's my personal opinion. It's not that of Lockheed's. So I felt very, very comfortable that what he was telling me was from his heart, was true. And I feel the same way. I feel that there's been too many things going on that lead me to believe that we're not alone. And if out of the millions upon millions of UFO, flying saucers, UAPs, whatever you want to call them, if only one of them is real, that's all you need. You don't need 10,000 or 100,000. All you need is to have one of the craft that people all over the planet have seen, and going back to ancient times. There's petroglyphs on walls in Australia and in South America and whatever, showing what appears to be discs in the sky, beams coming down, from the sky, creatures or humanoids with large heads and big eyes, or maybe they're wearing a spacesuit type of thing. I mean, and that stuff is found all over the planet. Now, maybe because we didn't have communication, worldwide communication back then, we had no communication other than smoke signals and runners going from one place to the other. There was no way to cause a panic. There was no way to get the information out, to share that information. And in today's world, with everybody having a smartphone with an incredible camera in it, it's only a matter of time before someone gets up close and personal to a UFO and we can see it. But because they have, well, since Roswell, they've done everything to discredit anybody who has any knowledge or any interest at all in UFOs. That attitude's changing. But, I asked my boss. I worked for Major General Wayne Gatlin for 5 years, and I said, General Gatlin, so I got a question, and I was enlisted. I said, let's say this is back in the 80s. I said, let's say I'm an Air Force or Navy pilot, military pilot, and I fly up, or I come in contact with a flying saucer. I follow it. I take mental pictures of it. I didn't have. They didn't have smartphones back then, so I didn't, the only thing that you would have would be a 35 millimeter camera, and you just don't take one of those up when you're an alert bird. It's just, what would I do if I saw one? And so he said, well, once you land, you go through your debrief, you go to the O Club, take a couple really, really big, stiff shots of the strongest stuff they had, then go home and go to sleep and forget about it. Because the second you come out and say, hey, I just chased the flying saucer, your career just went down to the toilet. That's not the case today, because there's too many collaborating people that are well trained. I mean, my wife never looks up in the sky. I know thousands of people that never look up in the sky. I'm surprised I don't trip on things, because I'm always looking at the sky. I'm always, and I've been out in Nevada, and at the fence line at either Area 51 or Tonopah Test Range, well over 80 times in the last 40 years. And they're up there. There's something there, and I really, really want to see it. I've been in Tippecanoe Valley, which is just east Area 51, right near the black mailbox. And the sun's going down. It was a sliver moon, and it's so black and so dark out that for about 30 to 45 minutes, I couldn't see my feet. It was that dark. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, okay, if you can read minds, if you believe in telepathy, is that right? Yeah.
Telepathy.
Telepathy, yeah. Abduct me. But please let me bring my camera. I want to cover this. And
it never happened, eh?
No, it never happened. Didn't even get a twin. I didn't even, and as much as I'm looking up in the sky, and as much as all the times I've spent in and around Area 51 or just Nevada in general, and I'm always up there, and I carry a set of binoculars with me everywhere. And when I'm anywhere out in the desert, even here in Arizona, I have my camera with me. I have a Nikon. I only have a 610. Maybe if I strike it rich with my Skunkworks books, I'll get a 850 or something like that, Nikon. But I'm always looking. I'm always hoping to see it. And someone needs, these little pixels of something moving through the sky. I don't know what it is. It could be a UFO. It could be a bug. It could be someone with a drone. But I think we're really close to disclosure, and we may not, and when I say we, I mean the governments of the world, they may not be in the driver's seat when it comes to disclosure. Like one Israeli scientist or engineer had said within the last year, he said,
the ex-director of the Israeli Space Agency.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
He said, we're not ready for it. And when that time comes, it's going to be like someone dropping a hydrogen bomb in your neighborhood. I mean, it's going to have, but my one of my biggest fear is that the idiots that the news readers that are on the idiot box every night, they'll find some way to ridicule anybody who sees, who has proof that UFOs were real. I mean, poor Bob Lazar just got skewered from one end to the other. And he told me here a couple of years ago, I said, Jim, says, the biggest mistake I ever made in my life was going public on what I did at S4. So my life has been just a pain in the butt from the naysayers and the people who want a piece of me, and those that want to ridicule me or do me injustice. And it's just, and that's the way we've operated since Roswell. Let's ridicule the person. Let's slam him. Let's make his life miserable. And
disclosure will come with the same reaction, because humans just don't like change. They like stability in what they know. And if you come out, everybody gets attacked. I involved Tyler Glockner in this film, and he's my friend. And this guy has been attacked so much left, right, and center over the years. And what he says to me is, I just want to make cool UFO related content for people to see. And he gets attacked a lot. And it's because people are just too challenged by the idea, and if the governments or there's some kind of public statement from the military about some kind of extraterrestrial involvement in the future, it's going to get attacked. I guarantee you it's going to become a huge discussion, and there's going to be just as much skepticism as there is belief, probably more skepticism.
And the other thing is, when it finally is made public, when the world finally is allowed to see it, it's either going to be like the day the world the day the Earth stood still, that 1950s vintage, and of course the recent version, or it's going to be like Mars Attacks. I mean, that's my favorite one. But you're going to have people. I mean, you could have one land in the middle of a Super Bowl in an open air stadium, have it land right on the 50-yard line at halftime, and there'll be people on CNN, the garbage news network. It should be GNN, saying, "Well, this thing's fake. How nothing like this could really happen." I mean, and that's what the lames will do. They will do everything they can to destroy the messenger, and that's not right. I mean, at one time I wanted to be a history teacher. I love history, and it pains me that they don't teach history at all in today's public schools. They're not schools; they're indoctrination centers. But it's going to happen, and when it's going to happen, there's going to be a lot of people with egg on their face. There's going to be a lot of people with it could have people go off the deep end. There's some thoughts that one of the reasons why you don't have disclosure yet is because they don't think the world, not the first world, but 95% of the population of the world is third world or worse. And what holds them together is the glue of a supreme being, whether it's Jesus Christ, God, Buddha, Muhammad, Adam Smith, or whatever, the candy guy down the end of the street. I mean, it's all that stuff is all the glue that holds the people together, that holds their feelings together and everything else, because I believe in God and he's going to be there. Well, maybe God is not from this planet. Maybe he really is a real entity. And if, when the day comes and it's brought to light, I think the world could come unglued. That's what civilization and being civil, believing in right and wrong is a very, very strong power. And if all of a sudden everything you believe in is turned to dust because we just had a UFO land in the White House lawn during an international news conference from the Rose Garden, that's when people, that's the only way the world is going to
consider it true.
Yeah, and they'll probably say, "Well, that's computer graphics. That's not real." And maybe we have to have a mothership like in Independence Day or some of the other UFO movies. But it's gonna be. I hope I live long enough to see it. I'm going to be 77 here real soon, and I really, really want to be around when one goes up and is able to shake the hand of the president or Queen Elizabeth or whomever. So it's just I'm waiting. It's going to happen, but it's going to happen on their timetable, not ours. So you can wish all we want. We could send letters or emails all we want to. I need this declassified. I need that declassified. Until it's ready to happen, it's not going to happen. You're just treading water. So, but it's real. There's too many people I know that are credible that have. Dave Fruehauf, for example, SR-71 pilot. He chased one in an SR-71, and it left him in the dust. And he was, I think he was asked to back off that statement. But I was in his house and we sat down. We were talking about blackbirds and everything else. He was an SR-71 pilot, and he crashed one. He was one that had a total electrical failure as a student pilot, and he had to bail out. And that's one of the reasons I was interviewing him. And then when we got done with the interview, I said, "Dave, you believe in UFOs?" And he said, "Oh yeah, they're real." I said, "You want to explain?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm flying an SR-71, late 72, early 73. The Vietnam War is still going strong. I'm flying out of Kadena. It's a night training mission." He was at 78,000 feet at about Mach 2.7, which is a normal cruising speed. The airplane loves to go fast, and the throttle is an absolute minimum burner. It's a 3/4 moon off to his left. And he gets a glint on something metallic 3 or 4 miles away, maybe a little bit farther, 4,000 or 5,000, 6,000 feet above him. So he contacts Kadena on secure voice to see if we have another blackbird up. He said, "No, you're up there by yourself." He said, "No, I'm going to go take a look." So he pushes the throttles forward and about a 10-degree bank, and he's starting to climb towards this object. His backseater gets on the horn and said, "Hey, Dave," says, "we got company?" He said, "Yeah, I'm going to go I'm taking a look." And he said, "We're still a couple miles away and still maybe a couple thousand feet below it. This thing took off and left him in the dust like he was heading the other direction." It wasn't a circular craft. It was reflective, and it had edges to it. And he said it left him between 8,000 and 10,000 miles an hour is what he figured, and he lost track of it going between 180 and 200,000 feet is what he estimates. Is it ours? No, this is 1972, 73. So he retires in 1980. He's looking for a job. He has a higher than top secret clearance. It's a job as facility manager at Area 51. He was responsible for all every building from the biggest hangar to the paint locker and all non-program aircraft, the hackbirds, the chase birds and stuff like that. So once he was there, he was there for 5 years, but he waited about a year. He knew most everybody there anyway, just because of involvement in the Blackbird program. But after he was there about a year, he's at the club after work. So he starts asking, hey, do we ever flight test something that can go Mach 12, Mach 15, Mach 16? Everybody said, no, not here. Why? I chased something. So he said he didn't find anybody at Area 51 that confirmed the fact that whatever he chased was not flight tested at Area 51. And if it wasn't flight tested at Area 51, I don't think any other country has the ability. Russia doesn't have the ability. The Chinese, they've stolen most of our technology. They don't have the ability to build something like that. Where did it come from? Is it a program that's so deep and so buried that not even the head of Lockheed Skunk Works knows about it? That's very possible. Is it possible that they've kept that from members of Congress? Oh, that's one of their favorite things to do. I mean, they were very limited when they were taking $2 billion in 1958. That was a ton of money back then, and they were using. That was the money they allocated to design, develop, build, flight test, and operate the original Blackbird, the A-12 Oxcart, and that was funded by and for the Central Intelligence Agency. But it was money well spent. You could not the amount of money they spent, even adjusted for inflation. It was the time frame. The time from signing a contract to first flight was such a short time. I was at Skunk Works in August of '88, and I saw the F-30. It was the X-35 Ironbird. It's primarily the airframe's made of steel, and they're just everything was fit and function. There's no skin on a lot of it. That was 40 years ago, and the F-1 and the F-35 is still not fully mission capable. Its initial operational capability is there, but its F4 or 4F version of their software hasn't been done yet. It's not completed. It won't be for another 2 years. So, we live in a different world from when the Blackbirds were developed and even the U-2 and the F-117. But the technology's out there, and we have. And there are billions of Earth-like planets in this universe. I was a docent at Kitt Peak National Observatories, about 50 miles west of Tucson. It's at 7,000 feet. They have 22 optical telescopes, everything from a primary mirror that's 12 inches to a primary mirror that's 13 feet. That's the Mayall telescope. And it's... And the 2.1 meter, Caltech used it for 5 years. And their job, they had adaptive optics. It would adjust for distortion, air distortion, 100 times a second. And for 5 years, they looked in a very, very small area of our Milky Way, just our galaxy. And in that 5-year time frame, they were able to catalog 8,000 exoplanets. 8,000. And just before I left being a docent at Kitt Peak, we had a meeting of all the astronomers, technicians, and docents. And the subject was exoplanets. And our speaker was one of the top people from the National Science Foundation. He had just returned from a conference on exoplanets. And they calculate using the best method mathematically, proven mathematically, they estimate that in the universe, for every star, there's 1.5 planets. And out of that incredible number, over 2 billion, that's with a B, 2 billion Earth-like planets orbiting a similar size brown dwarf star like our sun in the inhabitable zone with liquid water. And to quote Jodie Foster's character in Carl Sagan's movie Contact, if we're the only ones, what a waste of space.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah. So it's, keep looking. Don't, all of you are out there listening to this. Go out, look up in the sky. If you live anywhere near Nevada or whatever, make sure you have a camera with you. Not cell phone cameras are nice, but they can't really replace a really, really good.
Get something with a good lens and a zoom on, right?
Yeah. And because it's going to happen. And in today's world, someone shows you a photograph of a UFO. You don't know if it's been photoshopped or what it is. It could be one of these, very sophisticated drones you can get at Hobby Depot and whatever. The only photograph you really can't alter or change or fake is a Polaroid, because there's no negative. It's developed. Whatever the film sees is what is put onto the film, is onto the finished product, and there's no internegative or anything. So you can't fake something on a Polaroid. So if someone hands you a photograph, it's a Polaroid, then it's a pretty good idea it's real. If not, who knows? Yeah, I can, if someone wanted to really do a number on somebody, they can put you in bed with anybody or anything and you couldn't tell the difference. Your wife or your husband couldn't tell the difference.
Deepfakes are getting pretty crazy these days.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's a little alarming where that, who knows what direction that's going to go. It's only a matter of time till some scandal breaks and nobody's really sure if it's a true thing or not, right? I feel like that's going to happen. It has to. Going back to the movie, there was one part in the movie, Jim, where you held up a piece of material that was used on the outside of the stealth fighter. And I've heard of this material before, like I've heard rumors of it. And what I heard was it's sort of like a rubbery material, and it has like a microscopic texture that deflects radar, and that's the purpose of it. But is that what it was?
Yeah. I mean, it's the radar absorption material has been around for a long, long time. They use it on submarines. They use it on people have made bras for their cars out of radar absorption material. And what it does, it's a neoprene type of product that has primarily iron particles mixed in with it. And what happens, the radiator energy hits it, and it heats up the iron particles, and what that stuff that's heated up is not reflected back. So it's I held up a piece of F-117 RAM. A gentleman that I had some parts off a crashed one, and I gave it to him, and he said, "Well, as a thank you here," and he handed me that. And I said, "What's that off of?" I mean, it's shaped like an F-117. He said, "Well, that's what it came off of." So, and that's proprietary. I don't know if it has national security in it, but it is proprietary to the Lockheed Skunk Works.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, because I remember hearing about that, and it just sounded like such an odd thing, but it was kind of it's exciting for me to actually see it in the movie. Well, there it is. That's something I heard about many years ago, but it turns out to be true.
You can take that same material. And cover your car with it, and you can go through a speed trap at 150 miles an hour, and they won't even get a blip.
Nice.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can get that at the local auto parts store. Probably not, right?
No, I think radar absorption material, not the classified stuff, not the aviation quality stuff, but RAM is commercially available because they use it on other things besides airplanes, besides war machines. So there are commercial applications for it. I don't know any offhand, but we've been talking. I can remember back in the early '60s, someone had a hot car, and they wanted to see. It was a Porsche 911, and they had put they made a bra out of radar absorption material, and they had a certified calibrated radar gun from Highway Patrol at one end. They can zipping down this out in the middle of nowhere. And it wasn't until they were really, really close, I'm talking about hundreds of feet, not miles, where before there was any type of return coming back from the radar gun. And then to show you the effects of design of vehicles, they had I think it was a GMC Titan, the big flat nose, the flat face trucks you don't see them around anymore. But that thing had peaked on the radar, the cop's radar from 2.5 miles away.
Wow.
So design does make a big difference. And that's one of the reasons why, triangles do the same thing. from a frontal view, they reflect the energy away from the transmitting site. So
one thing that was touched upon briefly in the movie was the phrase unfunded opportunity. What's the significance of that phrase?
It came from a letter from Ben R. Rich, the president of the Lockheed Skunk Works, to John Andrews, who is he's the development director at Tester Company. They're out of Rockford, Illinois. They make scale model cars, planes, and whatever. And John had written a letter in early June of '86, asking Ben Rich, said, "Do you and Kelly," referring to Johnson, "do you believe in UFOs?" Now, there are two categories, both man-made and extraterrestrial. And Ben wrote back within the same week. He got the letter back handwritten on his corporate letterhead, and it's on the web. Michael Schratt has the original, and it was said, "Dear John," it says, "both Kelly and I are firm believers in both categories." Because Kelly Johnson saw 2 UFOs back in the 50s. He said, "We refer to ours as unfunded opportunities." He underlines the U, the F, and the O. If something was given to you or something crashed and you recovered it, you have this object, you have this technology, and you didn't have to pay for it. So it's an unfunded opportunity. And Ben says, "We refer to ours as unfunded opportunities," underline the U, the F, and the O. He said, "But beware, there are people who will lead you astray and could do you harm." But that is a quote from a letter from the president of Lockheed Skunk Works back in June of 1986, Ben R. Rich, president. So that's real.
Quite the authority. If you're talking about somebody reliable, that's about as reliable as it gets, I'd say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I have a question maybe for Darcy. In the movie, we see a whole lot of logos from different space agencies and programs. And I never really noticed this before, but you see the vector symbol in all kinds of them, and you show many, I don't know how many, dozens of them. What is the significance of this vector symbol in these logos? Is that like related to the TR3B?
Well, the first thing you have to know is that the vector shape wing design, that goes back to NASA's first hypersonic wing designs of 1959, before they even, flew into space. And so it starts there, but then it almost becomes an obsession in shape that all of the space agencies and a lot of the military and Air Force agencies that deal with space incorporate into their logos. So, it's kind of like a bit of a out there affirmation that there might be triangles flying in space, because you even see some of these mission patches or logos, and they have a bomber on there, or they have another sort of typical jet design beside one of these triangles. So it's like, what are they trying to say? Like, the jet already has that hypersonic design to it, so why would they put that beside a craft that looks like just a pure triangle, right? So, yeah, I think we wanted to go over a history of kind of hidden in plain sight, a possible affirmation that they're testing stuff out there in space that is possibly space capable, that looks like a flying triangle.
Yeah, and that hidden in plain sight thing does show up on occasion. And when somebody designs a logo for these, it as far as I can tell, the logo actually means something. It's not, they don't just use pretty artwork or whatever. It's designed specifically for something, right?
There is Air Force and military regulations on how an official patch is created. In the Air Force, it has to have a certain percentage of sky blue or night, your dark blue. It has to have a certain amount of yellow, and it has to have a certain amount of red somewhere within the official patch. So you look at the patch for Strategic Air Command or any of the units, and they all have to adhere to a certain standard, and it's reviewed. You're not allowed to have anything that depicts an actual airplane. It could be a representative shape, but you couldn't have the shape of the F-117, for example, on your official patch. Unofficial, you can do anything, but if it's an official unit from the United States military, there's heralding and history considerations have to be taken into any patch that you create. I know when I was stationed in Denver back in the early '60s, we were asked to develop a patch for our unit, and I submitted like 5 or 6 different versions. I sat down with my commander. We called him a urinal peck. His name was Colonel Peck. So it was, it's something that I was involved with, for well over about 5 weeks, working on it, and you're going back and forth, and of course this is before the internet, so anything you had to submit, you couldn't scan. You had to send them an original or a photograph of it to see what their reaction would be, and then you have to justify absolutely every component within that patch, within that official shield for your unit, your organization, or whatever it is. So if there's a uniformity with that hypersonic V shape, that has to be approved. That has to provide some part of the story of the unit that you're part of. So,
and if it has a black background, that can resemble night mission or space, right?
Correct.
So in the documentary, we show a bunch of these different patches that have lots and lots of black backgrounds. So it gives you an idea of the types of operations they'd be flying at night, or going into space and trying to be on the other side of the planet. Who knows?
And one thing I found surprising is actually the foreign countries, Japan and the Soviets or whatever, they all had similar shapes. So it was not just the United States. It was logos or patches from all over the world. I found that kind of surprising.
Jim say earlier that our technology has been poached by the Chinese and many other military and space research agencies over the years, right? They like to copy first, and maybe vice versa. Maybe sometimes we see something that they've come through with, and we invite one of their scientists over to work at Wright-Patterson Air Force, or Kirkland Air Base or something like that, to work on some exotic stuff. We did talk about metamaterials and that type of stuff in this doc as well, which, you can go back. There's been all kinds of scientists from around the world that will end up doing some of that work for the Americans.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, that's all the questions I had for you today. Is there anything else you wanted to mention about the movie before we wrap it up?
What? That's it?
That's all I had for you.
That's
it? That's enough. Plenty.
I hope Darcy and I answered a bunch of your questions.
Oh, yeah.
You really needed to.
There are more questions I do have, but I don't know. Like, for example, I was wondering, so that like the A-12 or the SR-71 can go very, very fast at altitude, but I've always wondered, can they fly the top speed, which would be Mach, like 3.2 or something? Could they fly that fast, or do we have anything that could fly that fast? Let's say 10,000 feet, because it would be too much friction, right?
The SR-71 A-12 is limited to about 500 knots indicated. At 85,000 feet at Mach 3.2, there's less than 0.4% of the atmosphere. So the the indicated airspeed, the real airspeed that you're seeing could be like 375 knots, but when in fact you are actually traveling about 1,800 miles an hour. So because the airframe is limited to to indicated airspeed. That's the amount of air particles hitting your airplane. So you could not go. You probably couldn't go supersonic very long at low altitude in an SR-71. First of all, the engines are very sensitive to temperature. They love to operate at minus 70, which I've actually worked in once in Tok Junction, Alaska in 1965. It was January. It was cold. The airplane just, it loves to fly fast. It'll actually fly itself to destruction or unstart. A good example, Bill Weir was flying SR-71 974. That was the best flying of all 50 other airplanes. And it was the last one that was lost. It crashed over off of Luzon in the Philippines in April of '89. But that airplane loved to go fast. And each airplane had its own personality. And Bill said they had finished their test card. They were flying out of Palmdale. It wasn't an Air Force mission. It was a Lockheed flight test mission. And he finished his test card and he radioed back to Palmdale and said, the airplane is running like a Swiss watch. I'd like permission to run it out. And they gave him permission. So he just pushed the throttles all the way forward, waited to see what happened. At Mach 3.43, which is like 2,230 miles an hour, the airplane had a dual unstart. In other words, it ejected a shock wave that's just inside the inlet. And you lose 80+% of your thrust when you have an unstart. And it was disintegrating. And I mean, because it literally, if they had the harness on, he would have gone through the front windscreen, and the back seater would have gone through his instrument console. It was that much of a slam to lose that much thrust. And the back seater, from what Bill told me, said he had, when they landed, immediately went into the bathroom, and I'm sure he changed his shorts because that's something that you're moving through the air at 3,700 second. You just it's an incredible. Everything about the Blackbirds are just unbelievable. And I was 18 years old when I saw my first one on March 10th, 1964, and I've never been the same. But the SR-71 likes to fly, and same with the A-12, likes to fly at the very edge of its operational envelope. It's actually 96 to 98% of maximum speed is where the airplane flies all the time. So.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Yeah,
and it was designed with slide rules.
Yeah,
not computers, slide rules.
If you look at how long ago, it really was a miracle of design technology, and to my knowledge, it still holds the airspeed, the official airspeed record. I'm sure they have something nowadays that could go faster, but it was really a marvel of technology when it was created.
It still is.
Yeah.
That's what's amazing. An engine that was developed in 1955 for the Navy, with all the operational SR-71s being built with Soviet-supplied titanium sponge. That's the raw material. And there still isn't anything that can touch it operationally that we know of.
Yeah, that's a brilliant part of the story that I found so amusing when I read about it, is that we actually sourced the materials to build it from the country we were using it to spy on.
Correct.
Using shell companies. Yeah.
And the sad thing about it, because of fear of starting World War III, we never overflew the Soviet Union. Part of the terms and conditions of the release of Francis Gary Powers after he was shot down in May 1st, 1960 in a U-2, he was in Soviet prison for 15 months, and they had a movie called The Bridge. Tom Hanks starred in it. And it was the swapping of Francis Gary Powers and the Russian spy that we had. Everything about it is just the airplane is just amazing. But the terms and conditions of the release of Francis Gary Powers, besides the prisoner swap, cessation of all manned overflights of the Soviet Union and its satellites, which means we didn't fly over the Warsaw Pact and we didn't fly over the Soviet Union. But we needed reconnaissance of the Soviet Union. We needed reconnaissance of the Chinese. So starting in shortly after Powers was released, they started working on the D-21 drone, which was a baby Blackbird that was initially going to be launched from a Blackbird, but operational was launched from a B-52. They built 38 of the drones. They were one-time mission only. Go over, take pictures, come back. It'd eject the camera pallet, and then it would blow itself up. The first one launched, kept on going. It didn't turn around and come back. It was dead reckoning. And when Ben Rich retired, he had a chance to go to the Soviet Union and meet with his counterparts at Sukhoi and Mikoyan and Illusion. And they handed him a box, a very beautifully hand-carved wooden box. He opens it up, and it was the data plate from a D-21 engine, the Marquardt ramjet. He said, "Mr. Rich, I think this belongs to you." So they had 4 operational launches. They didn't, like Kelly said, it was the most successful failure of any program he ever was part of. So it was a state-of-the-art airframe and propulsion dealing with 1940s electronics.
Wow.
Big, massive relays and bulky, high-temperature plugs with 100 to 150 pins on a cannon plug. If you ever tried putting something in that only had 1 or 2 and you bend one of the prongs, that's irritating. But if you have one that has 100 pins, and they're in so close together, it's a real joy. It's a real joy. And when they were building it, and designing it, it was more classified than the Manhattan Project. Because we were going to fly almost a Mach 4 drone, this thing with 3.8, 3.7 speed. And they were going to be either launched from a Blackbird or from a B-52. And instead of B-52, maybe a Russian commander would think, well, that's a B-52. He's launching a nuclear-tipped cruise missile at Moscow. Before he detonates, let's launch all our missiles to the United States, to North America. So because of those possibilities, the D-21 was not flown over the Soviet Union. Of course, that program was long over by the time Russia, the Soviet Union came apart. So,
well, Adam, thank you for chatting with us tonight, man. I'm sure we've given you lots of stuff to think about, but take care, man, and I'm sure we'll chat in the future.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. It was a really exciting topic to talk about, and I enjoyed having you on the show. I really appreciate it. Before you guys take off, would you let everybody know where they can find you, your work, and anything else you'd like to mention before we end here?
You want me to go first?
I'll go first, and then I'll hand it off to you, sir. Just check out my studio website. It's occultjourneys.com. And I've got all my film posters up there, trailers, descriptions of the films if you want to see what you're getting into. And if you click on the poster, it'll take you that you can watch one of my films. So, thanks. And I'm under the same handle on Twitter, and just Darcy Weir on Facebook and Instagram.
And I'm on Facebook, Jim Goodall, and you can always tell my site because I either have pictures of Hawaii, spooky airplanes, and sky stuff in there. But my books, the cheapest way to get it is go to Amazon. Books by James C. Goodall, Goodall. All my hardbound books are very prominent. My most recent one, The 75 Years of the Lockheed Skunk Works. I have probably the best pictorial history ever written on the blackbirds. It's my 25th book. And then I have one on the B2. Again, these are pictorial histories. And then I have the Los Angeles class fast attacks. That's one volume. Volume 2 is the Seawolf Virginia class. And then I have others that dealt with the F-117 and B-2 and stuff like that from Squadron Signal and whatever. And those are probably available to use because they're out of print. But they're there. If you order the 75 Years of Skunk Works, the book is 5.5 pounds. It's hardbound. And if you're a Prime member, you get free shipping. Now, I'm not a big fan of Amazon because they're killing a lot of small businesses, but they're selling a lot of my books. So I guess it's a two-edged sword. And if you live anywhere anywhere near in or around Arizona or New Mexico or Southern California, I'm all over the place. If you buy one of my books and you find me on Facebook and you say, okay, next time you're coming to such and such area, would you stop by and autograph my book? And the answer is yes. If it's convenient for both of us to do it, I'd be more than happy to. So,
all right,
that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I hope to chat with you sometime soon.
You take care.
Okay, you too.
Darcy, have a good one.
Thanks,
okay.
you too, Jim.
Bye, guys.
Talk to you in a bit.
All right. Bye.
Bye.